Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Today, as part of my 12 Days of Christmas, we're going to be talking about dice games. So you may have noticed that I did not include any dice placement games in my worker placement list. That's because I decided to give dice games their own category and their own list. Similar to my family games list, this one don't take too much stock in where I have placed them on the list, because some of these are, Yahtzee style games. Some of them are, dice worker placement games. But all of these use dice as the main mechanic. So if you are looking for a dice worker placement game, just focus on those on my list and, see where they rank. So these are rough rankings, but again, there's various ways these dice are used, so you can't always compare one game to the next. Number 12 is King of Tokyo. This is by Richard Garfield. For those of you who did not know, he came up with Magic the Gathering, basically. So this is the classic Yahtzee-style brawler game. It's a King of the Hill game in which you are attempting to be either the last monster standing or the first monster to reach 20 victory points. So when it's your turn, you're going to roll. They have 6 dice. You're all rolling the same dice. You're going to roll these out, and then you, like Yahtzee, get to choose which ones to keep. Roll again, re-roll, choose. You could, put them all back in. But basically, you get 3 rolls. At the end of the 3 rolls, you've got your dice that you need to then do stuff with. Those symbols on the dice may heal you, may attack the person, generally the one in Tokyo, may give you energy to spend on cards, or may give you just straight victory points to reach towards your goal. If you are outside Tokyo, everybody you're attacking is inside Tokyo. So usually that's just one person, but in a larger game, there's 2 of them in there. Or if you are in Tokyo, you can damage everyone else when it's your turn. Very simple, very fast gameplay. There is a lot of, gotcha in the game. Obviously, you are directly attacking these people. If you are reduced down to 0 health, you are out of the game. At any point in time after you are attacked, if you're in Tokyo, you can bail out, but you get points by staying in there and making a full turn back around to your turn. So you kind of want to go in there and maybe have a defensive card or something like that. I don't know. There's not a ton of strategy involved, but anyways, that is King of Tokyo. Number 11. Number 11 is one of the classics. That is Castles of Burgundy. So Castles of Burgundy is not doing itself any justice. It's a kind of a bland looking game. It's also a very fiddly game to set up, and between each round there's a fair amount of setup. I know I'm not talking this game up for it being number 11 on my list, but the gameplay itself is actually quite fast and very innovative. What you're going to do, the market board that you can see here on the top part of what's on the red mat, is like a market board. And down below is a person's personal estate that they're trying to fill in. On your turn, you're going to roll 2 dice and only 2 dice. And you then need to use those 2 numbers to either purchase something from a specific spot on the market board, like there'll be a 5 spot. So if you roll a 5, you get to claim one of those. Or if you can be holding on to up to 3 things. If you say roll a 4, then you can take it, and if the color matches, place it onto a 4 spot on your board, as long as it's there are rules for placement, things like that, but you get the idea of how things go here. So ideally, every time you roll the dice, the two dice give you outcomes that you can do something with and be productive. There are ways to manipulate the dice up or down. Most of that comes, though, in the form of kind of wasting a die to hire workers that you can then use in later turns to bump up and down the number. Obviously, sometimes that's just what you got to do, but that's not as efficient as just rolling the perfect roll. So that, this is a Euro game, but there's dice rolling involved, and you could get completely screwed by never rolling the numbers that you are looking to roll and have to spend your whole time hiring workers. It is a fun game, though. My preferred way to play, though, personally, is on the app, because the app takes away all of that fiddliness, adds a lot more color to it, and if you're playing solo, there is a solo mode for the game, but you can play against, you know, a normal person or multiplayer online, something like that. So I prefer to play Castles of Burgundy on my iPad, personally. Awaken Realms and I believe one other company are coming out with a special edition of this game, though. So hopefully the boring nature of the game will be drastically improved when the special edition comes out. Number 10 is Circadian's First Light. So this is by Garfield Games, but is not part of one of their kind of trilogies that you know of, North Sea, West Kingdom, or South Tigris. This is a worker placement game that you are placing dice as your workers. So, at first glance at this game, it looks very complicated. There is a lot going on. The boards are very busy. But it's pretty simple once you get the gist of just what each board does, what each location does, and really the higher the number, it either specifies which like tile you are picking up if you're going to a place that's going to give you tile, or which direction you can point your rover in and move your rover to gain resources, or how powerful that action is. The trick with Circadian's First Light is that before every round, or at the beginning of every round, you're going to roll out your dice, and then you're going to hide behind like a DM screen. Everybody has their own little screen, and you have to place out your dice in the order in which you plan to use them, and then stick to that order. So then once everybody's placed their dice, everybody reveals, and you go around in turn order, placing one or sometimes two dice at a time. But if somebody like goes and steals your spot, you still got to do something with that first die. So really, this game has a ton of thinkiness at the beginning of the round, because everybody's sitting there trying to plan out their turn, as well as, you know, possibly consider what are other people going to do. The AI works pretty well for the solo mode. It basically just takes all of its actions ahead of time, blocks you off some spaces, and then you go. So pretty much you know that once the AI goes, you're free to go wherever you want to go, but they can really screw with your plans. But it works. The AI does work. You know, the artwork is typical Garfield Games artwork, and they just did recently redo all the artwork. So the picture you saw there was second edition. It just kind of improved everything, but gameplay is almost exactly the same. Number 9. Number 9 is Masmorra Dungeons of Arcadia. So if you listened through to the end of my dungeon crawlers list, you'll notice that I highlighted this one as a dungeon crawler for me that it was honorable mention. It didn't quite make the list. It is great though if you enjoy a dice mechanic and a dungeon crawler. So what Masmorra does is you have these black dice that you're going to roll out at the beginning of your turn, and this determines the actions that you can then take on your turn. You'll see like the footprints. That gives you a point of movement. You can move from one tile to the next. Potions allow you to use a potion, heal, stuff like that. The bow and arrow allows you to do a ranged attack. The sword allows you to do a melee attack. Sometimes when you go into a room, it may be a trap, and you have to put down certain dice faces, you know, to spring the trap. Or if you go into a room with a treasure chest, you have to put down certain dice faces to unlock the treasure chest and get the treasure. So it's really fun that you never quite know what you're going to be able to do on your turn. There are ways to manipulate the dice, and there are ways to get like permanent symbols, like movement symbols, so you're not always just stuck. The other part that this game uses that is dice related is the monsters. So all of the monsters, when you walk into a room, it's just going to give you a color of die to roll. And you can see the monsters in this picture here, they're all in the blue ones. The blue die, they're all the same, but each face of that blue die has a different monster on it. And all the stats that you need, the hit points and the attack and all that defense for the monster is right there on the die. So not only does it give you a colorful representation of the monster, so it's not a gray plastic miniature, but it does even more than a standee does, because it gives you A, that information you need, but B, it allows you to randomize the monster that you're going to see. I really love this mechanic, and I honestly don't understand why, especially CMON, has not delved back into this mechanic for other games, because I just really like the rolling out of a random person and then the die being the only thing I have to keep up with. So yeah, there you go. The games for this one are not super in-depth, so some people may really appreciate that. There's no like campaign mode. You're basically procedurally generating your dungeon as you go along, making it to the boss and defeating the boss. You're going to level up your character quite a bit over the course of a short game. It's not a long game either, so hopefully I've given you something that means this is right up your alley. Number 8 is One Deck Dungeon. So I also have already spoken about One Deck Dungeon in my solo games, but obviously it has a lot of dice rolling, so it's a great dice game. In One Deck Dungeon, for those of you not familiar, you're going to start with a hero, say the archer here, and you can see that the archer has 2 swords, 1, 2, 3 boots, and 2 blue symbols, which is like magic. Well, those equate to dice that you create a dice pool with. You're going to take those dice when you are taking on, say, like a skeleton enemy or a spiked pit trap, and you're going to roll them all out and then hopefully be able to cover up all these little squares on the encounter card. So for the skeleton knight, you're going to want to have 4s or higher, at least in yellow, and then 5s and 6s in, that should be blue, the color's a little off. If you can cover up all of his spaces, there's no damage to you, there's no detriment, you didn't take too much time, but you can still complete defeating the skeleton knight. You just may, if you can't cover up the 4 with the 2 hearts, then you're going to take 2 damage. Stuff like that. So, and for the skeleton knight, the blue shields means that you have to cover those up first. So unless you can cover up all 4 squares, you might take 2 damage. You're still going to defeat the skeleton knight, you're just going to take 2 damage. Once you have defeated an encounter, or sucked at defeating it, you know, just gotten through it, you then get to decide how are you going to use this card. Or am I going to use it for the stuff on the left, which means I will, like in a, I think these are older cards, but really, am I going to add a yellow die to my dice pool? Or down here on the spiked trap, am I going to add a blue die and a permanent heart upgrade, you know, HP boost? Or am I going to use it for the bottom, which is a skill that you can tuck under the bottom of your worker? And for the skeleton knight, for example, if you roll a 4 blue or higher, or spend a 4 blue or higher die, you can gain a 2 blue and a 6 yellow. You know, these are just ways to manipulate your die after you have rolled them. You basically just kind of go through several rounds of dungeon delving to increase your character to a point where then you can take on a boss, and that's it. The dice are small because at some points you're going to be rolling 10 to 15 dice at a time, so it's nice that they fit in your hand, but it is very satisfying just rolling out all these dice, and then at that point it becomes a puzzle to see how can you cover everything up, how can you use your skills, so on and so forth. Number 7. Number 7 is another Garfield game, and this is Wayfarers of the South Tigris. I actually talked about this one in my worker placement games. So Wayfarers of the South Tigris utilizes worker placement of meeples, but also dice. Now your meeples, the worker meeples, are going to go out onto that main board and be placed onto cards to either activate that card or, you know, at some point you could gain that card, and that's going to bring that meeple back to you. So there are times where you don't have a meeple to place out. You may be without sans worker meeples. You always have your dice in this game. And the engine that you are trying to build is to put more tags to create it so that each die phase, or a way that you can manipulate to get to those die phases, has all the tags that you want. Meaning, when you roll a die and say it gives you a 3, that's the pip number showing, 3s may give you a camel tag and a telescope tag, which means you could probably purchase a land card or a space card. If it doesn't have a sailboat tag, then you can't buy a water or harbor card with a 3. But as you go throughout the game, you could upgrade that 3 to give it that tag, and now every time in the future you roll a 3, it now has the camel, the telescope, and the boat. So there's a lot of, you know, tags, as we call them, iconography, but you're really just trying to improve how well those dice work for you. But you always have your dice. You start with 3, and eventually by the end of the game you're rolling 5. And when you rest, you're going to get all your dice back, but basically you're placing your dice out on your own tableau that you've built. Wayfarers of the South Tigris is easily the most complicated game, I feel like, in any of their main kind of trilogy system, but it's a very satisfying game. So it's very crunchy. There's a lot of decisions to be made. You can definitely fall into analysis paralysis. It's a great solo mode, though. Yeah, and this one's relatively new. Should be hitting retail about now. Number 6. Number 6 is Monsterlands. Monsterlands would easily fit onto a top 10 hidden gems list for me because I don't feel like this game gets enough credit. So Monsterlands is another dice placement game. So it's a worker placement game, but you're going to roll out your dice and then use those dice to, you're going to get better actions. The higher the number, more than likely. Also, only certain color dice can go to certain locations. The whole goal of this game is to go out and kind of build up your character and your crew to then be able to go out and fight monsters and take on areas to gain yourself valor and victory points at the end of the game. It's a beautiful game. It's very colorful. It looks really nice laid out on the board. It's not overly complicated to learn. And again, I just think this game does not get enough credit. I have heard, this hasn't been 100% confirmed, but I believe the designers behind Monsterlands have announced that in 2023 they're going to be coming out with Monsterlands 2, which will be a standalone game. I don't know if it'll be a pure sequel. I don't know if having Monsterlands, the original, will get you anything. But I'm very excited to see what they come up with because I've always really appreciated this game and feel like it just does not quite get the credit it deserves. Number 5. Number 5 is Under Falling Skies, which was actually somewhat of a surprise to myself, my number 1 solo game. It's a great dice rolling game, but there are even better ones. So Under Falling Skies is this puzzle game where you're going to be rolling the same number of dice every round, and then you have to place these dice, each one in a separate column. These dice, where you place them in the rooms that you place them, are going to activate certain things, and generally the stronger the die you roll, the stronger the action you take. But there's a caveat to that. Whatever number you place into that column also activates the enemy ships that are coming down from the mothership. So if you place a 5 in a certain column, every ship, enemy ship that's in that same column is getting to move down 5 spaces towards your city. Now that may put them strategically right into the path of one of your anti-aircraft guns or something like that. But just, that's kind of how the tension of the game works. You are trying to excavate your underground base to make it more powerful and give you more options, all while increasing research before the mothership comes down and all the enemy ships destroy your city. That's the gist of it. It plays pretty quickly. It is a solo-only game. It's definitely very much a puzzle type of game, and there is even a campaign mode that is sneaky good mixed in there. Number 4. This is Star Wars Dark Side Rising, but really I'm going to talk about all of the insert IP name here, Rising games. So originally it was Thanos Rising. That was the first game to come out. It had the Marvel theme and all Marvel characters. Then about the same time, they came out with Star Wars Dark Side Rising and Harry Potter Death Eater Rising. So this obviously utilizes Harry Potter characters. Star Wars uses Star Wars characters. They have announced now that they will be coming out with Rise of the Avatar Airbender, Avatar The Last Airbender, Fire Nation Rising. Whew, that was a lot to get out. I am not an Airbender fan or Avatar fan, so I don't honestly know anything about whether this is a good implementation of the IP or not, but that's the next one that's coming out in this series. The series is very simple and straightforward and appears to be the same across all aspects. When it's your turn, you're going to pick generally a region of the board. Usually the circle is broken up into 3 parts. So you're going to pick a third of the board that usually gives you 3 cards to focus on, and then you roll out your dice pool. At the very beginning of the game, that dice pool is pretty small. As you gain allies to your side, they're going to increase and improve your dice pool. But you roll out your dice, and you have to take at least 1 die and the face that it's on and lock it in by placing it on a card somewhere. That could be an ally or it could be an enemy. If you then fill up all of the symbols that are on an ally or an enemy, you either are doing damage to the enemy or you're gaining the ally into your hand. In between turns, the bad guy, so Thanos or Darth Vader or Voldemort, or I don't know who the Avatar guy is, they are going to be spinning around damaging cards in their area. They also might be activating things. In Star Wars, it's the Death Star. In Thanos, it's the Infinity Gems. If they activate the entire Death Star, or say the Infinity Gauntlet, I honestly don't know what it is for Harry Potter. Maybe the Deathly Hallows? Then you lose the game. Or if they take out a certain number of good guys, you lose the game. Your objective is to take out a certain number of bad guys before any of that happens. And that's it. It's very simple. So you can re-roll your dice as many times as you have dice, but each time you have to decide, I'm keeping this one. You can't just re-roll all of them. You have to keep one and then move on. Or you could keep all of them. You could have a perfect roll the first roll and place them all out, and bam, I'm done. It's a very easy game to teach. Kids can get it because it's all just symbol matching, things like that. There's not a whole lot of reading to be done. So in this case, pick your theme. Do you love Marvel? Do you love Harry Potter? Star Wars? Avatar? They got them all. Number 3 is Role Player. So this could also kind of include Role Player Adventures. They're essentially the same game. One is more kind of RPG story related. Role Player is a pure kind of character creation puzzle, but it is a beautiful puzzle. I honestly don't care whether I'm playing this solo or, competitively. It's all still fun. You're pretty much just focused on you. The only thing with playing with other players is they can take the die you may want or the card from the market you may want. But essentially, at the beginning of every round, you're going to roll out a certain number of dice based on player count plus 1. That could be, and you're going to draw these dice out of a big black bag so you can't see what you're drawing. So you could pull out, 3 different colors of dice. You're going to roll those down like a dice tower, roll them out, and then place them out from lowest to highest. Usually higher numbers works well for you, but whoever chooses the lowest number, the die all the way to the left, is going to get first choice at the market. So maybe the card at the market, or one of the 3 cards at the market, is much more beneficial to you than the higher number die. Either way, when you take a die, you're going to have to put it into this little grid that you can see next to on your player board, and they're punched out player boards so the dice settle in there nicely. You are then attempting to hit on certain number ranges, so counting up the pips left to right in each row. You're looking to hit on a certain color pattern, looking at it from above, as well as you use skills, moving that white cube around. So there's a lot to think about. And then there's ways to manipulate the dice. Every time you place a die in a specific row, that row grants you an action that you can take, usually with the other dice. So this is really just a puzzle, but it's a very fun puzzle and a very colorful puzzle. The expansions add things like monsters that you can, if you don't want to go to the market, you can go off and fight a monster with your dice and things like that. And then the last expansion added some like minor little fiends that you got to deal with, but also kind of pets. Really just, it works really well. Pretty straightforward to teach, but there's a lot of skill involved in playing the game well and mastering and being able to hit all your lines and all your rows. It's very difficult to hit everything on 100%. At the end of the day, especially if you're playing solo, it's really just a beat your own score or whoever has the high score. If you want more, you can take your character then and transport them over to Role Player Adventures and play through like an RPG-like campaign with them. Number 2 is Dice Throne. I already talked briefly about Dice Throne in my family list, but you had to see this coming, that this was one of my top dice games. So if you did not hear my spiel back in my family list, Dice Throne is another Yahtzee-style battler, similar to King of Tokyo, but this one is meant to be head-to-head. You can play 3, 4 plus players. In those instances, you're either playing teams or kind of King of the Hill, where whoever has the highest HP is the one getting attacked. But first of all, the production value of all of their content is amazing. Each character has its own unique board with amazing artwork on it, health dials, CP dials, status effects, tokens, and they also have their each unique set of 6 dice. When it's your turn, you're going to roll these dice out, and then you get to re-roll any ones you want up to 2 more times. At that point, then you have to decide, what am I going to do with these dice? And you're looking at there's numbers and symbols on the die, and you need to decide based on your player board, what can I do with the dice I have? Did I roll, and there's a lot of like poker themes, but not really, but like, did I roll a large straight? If I did, I can do one of my really good attacks. I'm going to do you for this number of damage, I'll put this status token on you, bam, 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 bam. All right, now it's your turn. Or if I rolled just all 1s and 2s and 3s, you could do like the lighter one. Or did you roll like a full house? That's a really good attack for most characters. But you're basically just looking at your player board, figuring out what you have done with your dice, and saying, all right, I attack you for this much. They may be able to defend or hit you back, but it's just a back and forth, just like that. Very simple. This is a game you can easily teach your kids if that's the only part of the game you play with. There is a lot more strategy and a little bit more complication if you add in the combat points. This is points that you gain like at the beginning of every turn and throughout the game that allows you to play these cards, spend them on these cards that you can have in your hand. This will do things like upgrade your board to like a level 2 move, or change your dice roll, heal you, give you CP, it may give you a status effect or allow you to give your opponent a negative status effect, things like that. So the game takes leaps and bounds when you start including the cards, but you don't need to if you're trying to teach the game, especially to a younger audience. They have 2 seasons worth of generic Dice Throne specific heroes you can see here, and then they also, their most recent line was the Marvel line, Marvel Dice Throne. So you can play as Thor versus Loki or Captain Marvel versus Black Panther. Also, what's really nice is the entry point for this game. If you just want to test the waters of Dice Throne, go to your friendly local game store, or Target, I know, has the Marvel versions. Barnes & Noble has almost all the versions, I believe. But you can just pick up a single battle box, or battle pack, which is just a 2-pack. You know, you can say, all right, I'm going to play Cursed Pirate versus the Artificer. I'm going to buy this pack. They're always reasonably priced. You go home, and the 2 of you just play against each other, swap characters, and then you can decide, is this worth me picking up more characters for? Do I want to go all in on a full battle chest instead of just the battle boxes? Or do I just want to pick and choose, and we'll just go pick our certain characters, and you fall in love with 2 characters and always play with them? That's perfectly fine too. But this is a great game to just have around, and if you're needing to bring out something at, like, you know, Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, or teach to a group quickly and then just let them all pick and go. It's a really fun game. Works really well. Dice Throne. Number 1. My number 1 game, as far as dice games is concerned, is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is by Chip Theory Games. And Chip Theory Games is easily one of the highest production value companies out there. Everything they produce is like waterproof cards and player aids, weighted chips, heat transferred dice, colorful dice, neoprene mats. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. It's everything that everybody else is charging for as like add-ons comes in the core box of a Too Many Bones game. Now, Chip Theory Games are not cheap, but you are getting a lot when you pay that price tag. In Too Many Bones, you are playing through a series of scenarios over a course of days to eventually take on a tyrant, a bigger boss at the end. Your goal of all of this is really to upgrade your character. This is a character creation game at the end of the day. and you're deciding what do you want to focus on in your character creation, because every die you see here's Pickett's blue dice. Every single one of those die equals a skill that Pickett can learn when he spends his experience points, that are then in battle rolled out. And so you may hit the face you want, or you may hit the bones. That's why the game is called Too Many Bones, which you can then use bones to put into your backup plan, which will give you things. But obviously you want to kind of have the best loadout of dice that are going to allow you to go out and complete these kind of tactical skirmishes against smaller minions, and then eventually a big tyrant boss. So there's never going to be like moving through a dungeon or anything like that. It's either a battle, and you can see that little tactical map there with all the circles and X's on it. It's a very small grid, very tight battling. Or the rest of the adventuring is just kind of done by flipping over a card and reading the text. For the most part, you're either battling, or maybe you get a day off to just eat or something like that. But I have just always really loved the variety and the gear locks, the superb nature of the components of each game. Chip Theory Games just knocks it out of the park every single time. And so this is kind of a no-brainer for a lot of people. Again, it is a high price tag. This game is not sold in like Walmarts and Targets. You might be able to find it in a friendly local game store. The best way to go about getting you a copy is to go to chiptheorygames.com, go to their web store. But yeah, and there are different base games that you can get into. They all work well together, but there's Too Many Bones, there's Too Many Bones Undertow, and then coming out in 2023 will be Unbreakable. All three of these can be played on their own or combined together. Take that for what you will. But Too Many Bones is a beautiful, beautiful game. It's all about character creation, a lot of great artwork and whimsy in the game, a lot of great production value. Alright, that's going to do it for my list of dice games for this 12 Days of Christmas video. A few honorable mentions to tag here at the end. I spoke about Deep Space D6 in my solo games. That's another great dice game. There's also Fuse, which is a time-based kind of pressures on, roll the dice as fast as you can, hit the numbers, and then there's a lot of dexterity in having to stack up the numbers and the dice and things like that. The whole theme of that is it's supposed to equate to you defusing a bomb. And then last but not least is Sagrada. Sagrada is one of those Azul type games that's very pretty to look at, very easy to teach, easy to convince people to play. Basically you're rolling out a certain number of dice, and then there's a draft, like a snake draft, go there and back, where you're drafting the dice that you want to put into your stained glass window. And then once you get the dice, you have to place your dice out, usually adjacent to a dice you've already played. You're attempting to hit a specific pattern that's unique to you, as well as certain bonus patterns that are out there, community patterns for everybody to hit. The better your stained glass window is at the end of the day in comparison to your pattern, the higher points, and you win. So there you go. That was my 3 honorable mentions. If you are enjoying this series, please consider giving these videos a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.